Welcome, everybody. It's No Brush Required. It's our third No Brush Required Reads episode with myself, Tamara Grant, and be on any second now. Here she comes. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How about yourself?
I've been in a tizzy this morning.
There was about 20 seconds there where I thought, is it Tuesday? I'm like standing here going, she's always like clockwork.
I did the stupid thing of thinking I could accomplish something in a time period, starting 15 minutes ago.
No.
And it's an online banking thing, and I'm cutting out a lot. Well, that's how my day's going.
Yeah, no, you can't do anything. Like basically I do lunch and then I lounge before this so that I don't get swept away into something else.
I know. All I was trying to do was link up a new credit card to an Aeroplan rewards account.
No.
And I'm getting blocked at every single step. And then I'm waiting for the email they're supposed to send me with a code, and it's not coming. And Danielle said I'm cutting in and out, which now is my worry that it's an internet problem. I don't know.
You're not cutting in and out to me.
Okay.
So
I'm not.
It's not
cutting in and out to me either. So there we go.
I don't think you are. Now that I'm.
So and I'll tell you that the reason why I'm on all this is because I'm trying to find points for airline flights, and so. Yes, I got it. I got a new credit card, and I'm trying to activate it and get the points on, and now the points aren't showing up, and I'm getting annoyed. So there we go.
This is what Roman does in our household. He's the guy who calls Bell, he calls Aeroplane, he calls Sirius Radio. If you need anything done, he's the guy. He's like, honestly, he's quite masterful at it.
They make it kind of complicated because all these little things have to connect up, and they make it sound like it's really easy, and you follow the steps and you do the 1, 2, 3. And then basically what I've discovered is there's no points accumulating on my account with purchases. Why is that? Oh, maybe I was supposed to do this other thing too, but nobody told me.
Of course not. No, they're not going to tell you. Why would they tell you?
Anyways, it's all good. And that's just how the morning has gone. These little things you think will take 2 minutes, and all of a sudden, half an hour of your day is gone.
Yeah, no such thing.
Yeah.
So you know what happened last week while we were doing this, eh?
Hi, Patricia. No. Oh, you were doing some stuff in the background. Oh, this was the time that the exact moment that Roman had catastrophe.
Not the exact, but the lead up. So if anyone doesn't know, Roman was helping my friend Adrian with her beekeeping enterprise, and they brought the bees home last Tuesday back to her farm and had built a platform and got the hives all set up. And he was carrying a box of bees, and he hooked his foot under the edge of the platform and went down hard, like really hard, and ended up breaking his foot. So I get the call after No Brush Required from Adrian, and she said, Roman's been hurt. And I'm thinking, okay, she's kidding. Ha ha ha, really funny joke. And then she's like, no, he's really been hurt. And I'm like, oh my God. So yeah.
So
we've had a week. We've had a week and a half in a week.
So he's in his boot, and he's in his rolly crutch.
He's got crutches, and then he's got this knee crutch called an iWalk, which is not as easy as the video would make you think when you watch it on the website. So he's kind of been trying with that. But he's got his CAT scan Thursday morning to see if there's more damage than what the x-ray could see, and hopefully to rule out surgery. We don't want the surgery.
Right.
But, if he has to get surgery, he has to get surgery. So.
What are your wait times like for surgery in Ontario?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. So we'll find out. So he has first thing in the morning Thursday the CAT scan, and then he's meeting with the surgeon, I guess, just to read the results and kind of look at possibilities. So
yeah,
the poor guy.
Oh man,
I know.
So you're taking extra special care of him?
Yeah.
He's missing his workouts in the morning, right?
Missing his workouts. He's missing, this is not happy because he just got a new car, and yes, he can drive it a little bit, but you know, he's not going to be doing big road trips. And yeah, like, you know, he got himself into really good shape, and now he's going to have to, you know, stay off it. This is bike riding weather. He loves to go on his bike.
Oh man.
And we don't have our balcony because they're going to be doing construction on it, so we can't even go sit out there. This too shall pass. There are worse things.
Maybe he'll take up painting.
He did. He was painting birdhouses.
That's right.
And he loved it. He really enjoyed it. And I picked up more birdhouses, so we're going to do more.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Sorry you guys are going through this. Hopefully it's, you know, it's the easiest possible route to recovery.
Yeah, I hope so. The swelling's going down. When I see his foot, I'm like, well, that's got to be a good sign. Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anyways, enough about that.
Yeah. Hey, Douglas. Douglas is here. Patricia's here. Hey, you guys. So today, let's do our intro. So today is no brush required. Reads. I struggle with that every
Reads. N-D-R-R.
Right. Speak, Tamara, speak. So this is like the third time we've done this, and the book that we are going to talk about today is called by Rick Rubin. It's called The Creative Act, and I'm just going to read a little bit that I pulled off of Amazon this morning, because his backstory is actually as interesting, if not more interesting, than the book. So many famed music producers are known for a particular sound that has its day. Rick Rubin is known for something else, creating a space where artists of all different genres and traditions can hone in. I should put my reading glasses on. That's what they're for. And hone in on who they really are and what they really offer. He has made a practice of helping people transcend their self-imposed expectations in order to reconnect with a state of innocence from which the surprising becomes inevitable. He has been involved with so many famous bands, the Ramones, the Dixie Chicks, OG rappers. I can't remember the names of them all now. And I actually went down rabbit holes the last couple of weeks, not only working through the book, but also there's so many podcasts that he's been interviewed on recently that you get to hear more about his story and the people that he's worked with. And basically the book is kind of a culmination of all of the teachings and techniques and tools and approaches he's used with this huge diversity of musicians over a very lengthy career to get them to come to the studio and produce their best performances, getting the best out of them, right? I think Nick Wilton interviewed him.
Did he?
I think so. Oh, and Patricia said her husband worked with him. Is it Patricia? Is in the music industry.
Yeah.
I listened to a fascinating interview with him on Dax Shepard. What's the name of that? Armchair Experts.
Yeah.
Just a really interesting guy, and not at all what I expected from the book.
Oh yeah.
So
I have to say I kind of got off track with a whole pile of stuff this last week, so I haven't listened to any of the podcasts with him in it.
Okay, well then we're even, because I'll admit right now I didn't finish the book, but
I look at all my notes.
Well, and you know what? There's a reason for that, is because, and I started it a month ago, and when I first picked it up, I started reading things, and I was spending as much time writing down notes as I was reading. And there's another one, Ezra. Lindsay said another podcast he's been on. I was spending all this time writing things down and feeling like I had to internalize it all. I had to get the most out of it, and I realized very quickly that pretty much yes, Patricia, I could have underlined the entire book. That's exactly what happened. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up picking up Audible. It has a free membership for a month if you sign up, and I got it on Audible for audiobooks, and I found I really preferred listening to it because each chapter is like 5 to 10 minutes in his own words, and it's almost like meditation. So it's almost like you don't have to hear every word, but you listen to a 10-minute segment of it, and you get a sense of what that little snippet is about. And so that's how I've been using it. I've been listening to it when I walk. I've been listening to it in the gym. I've been listening to it before I paint as a little quiet time. And I do have a couple of favorite chapters, but I almost feel like sitting down with this and reading it like I would read a novel is doing it a disservice, because you start to you start to lose the detail, and you get it gone.
I think it's one of those books where you could reread it every year, every few months, or just pick it up and open it to wherever. And it's like little digestible components. And you're right, it's almost too much. I read it start to finish, and I read it on my e-reader, which is kind of frustrating because you can't put Post-it notes and things like that. It's one of those books where I kind of wish I had the hard copy, but I think I'll be reading it multiple times. And it's like a textbook. Like, you're not supposed to read a textbook start to finish. You're supposed to do a little chunk at a time and then let it kind of process and think about it, and then move on to the next. But
I almost think of it, I almost think of it as like a devotional, like one of those books where you pick up and you read something every single day. It's a small bit of time. And the way the chapters are titled, you could almost just look at the titles of the chapters. Like, you know, I really love the one called Patience, Beginner Mind. There was a couple that really resonated with me, and I can see, you know, flipping through the table of contents and going, oh, patience, that's something that, you know, right now that would really be a good thing to re-explore, and then just to kind of reread it and take it in that way. That's I think that's how I'm going to be using it. So the audiobook has been great. So I'm going to end up with the Kindle version that I bought that I couldn't take notes on. So I kind of abandoned about 2/3 of the way through. Then the audio book version, which I really like, just to have someone read to me, because he's got a really kind of comforting, melodious voice to listen to. But I'll probably end up going out and buying a hard copy of the book too, because I like flags and underlines.
Well, I was able to find a really good summary with like key takeaways, because I thought I have to have something that I can just throw some stuff out there today and you know, kind of see what people think, see what you think. I love this beginning bit, that creativity is universal. So it's not a rare ability. I'll just read this. So creativity is not a rare ability. It is not difficult to access. Creativity is a fundamental aspect of being human. It's our birthright, and it's for all of us. Funnily enough, when Roman was sitting and painting the birdhouses, it's the first like artsy thing I've ever seen him do in, you know, the couple of decades I've known him, honestly. And I remember thinking, well, there's your proof. Like, you know, somebody who was, you know, an executive, and he's a mathematical thinker, and he's logical. He's kind of Mr. Spock, right? But there he was, and really getting into the painting of this little birdhouse. And he said he actually almost went into a meditative state when Adrian and I left. Adrian and I were laughing our heads off. We just got so silly. So we left to do something else. And he said when he was quiet and nobody else was around, it was like meditation for him. And I thought, oh my God, like that's pretty neat. He's being creative and he's in flow, I guess.
Yeah, and it's pretty neat that he let himself get there, because a lot of people who don't think that they are creative, the block is that they think they're not creative, and so they don't give themselves permission to experience that.
That's right. That's right. So that was kind of a cool, like a cool real life example of it's true. We're all have the potential to be creative in a million different ways.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I must say, though, at the very beginning, I got a little stuck when I was reading, because he talks about that, and it makes, you know, I agree that there's a lot that we all have the potential to be creative. We start out as creative beings as small children, and then that sort of gets pushed away for some people, and it gets accentuated for other people for whatever reason. But then, you know, he segued into a little bit about talking about like the artist, right? And so what is art? And so then I kind of struggled, because if everyone's creative and everyone's an artist and everything is art, nothing is art.
But you see, I don't think,
I got a little
think that was the message, though. I don't think that was the message. I think, again, I've got a little bit highlighted here about what is an artist. So to live as an artist is a way of being in the world. So not everybody is in the world the same way, right? So if you have an engineering kind of mind, you're looking at things differently. So it's a way of perceiving, and it's a practice of paying attention, which I thought was quite interesting. And as an artist, we're refining our sensitivity to tune into the more subtle notes. So looking for what draws us in and what pushes us away. So that may not necessarily be true for every person's creativity potential is not necessarily that. So maybe that's a distinguishing feature of being an artist.
Could be. Yeah, it could be. Before we go any further, maybe we should say how things might work.
Oh yeah, how will things work?
How things work. So if you guys have done, before we go on, if you guys have joined us with one of our reads before, we do encourage anybody who wants to come on camera and share the conversation. All you have to do is hit that little plus camera button at the bottom of your screen just under Barb, and that'll ask me to invite you on, and then I'll accept, and your camera will be on, and make sure it's facing you so we can see you and you can talk. Just because if all of the comments start happening, if we have a conversation in the comments, they scroll up, and Barb and I lose them.
Like a good one just went by, and I'm only seeing the
them.
bottom of it.
We lose them quickly, and once I pull them back on, then I won't see Barb's face for the rest of this. Here we go.
Goes Barb down there.
Through an inner knowing in our subconscious, things we cannot articulate but can express via art, whatever that form takes. That's why it's so important to take note. Whoops, see, that happened. Uh-oh. There we go. That's why it's so important to take notice of what we are noticing, which I totally agree. I thought that was really interesting. It was a great little mantra too, like notice what you notice, right?
And what you're sensitive to.
Meta noticing.
Yeah. I love that. I love this. So living life as an artist is a practice. So there's a whole, basically, I think the book is about the creative process and the practice, right? So you are either engaging in the practice or you're not. So it makes no sense to say that you're not good at it. So that's not even an option to say I'm not good at it. It's like saying I'm not good at being a monk. I don't know what it's like to be a monk, but he seems to. You are either living as a monk or you're not. And we tend to think of the artist's work as the output. The real work of the artist is just a way of being in the world. I thought that's really interesting. So it's not just about making art. It's way more than that. That's only part of it, a small part of it.
No, I agree. One of the things I also thought was really interesting, because this is not the first, well, here you go. This is not the first place I've read about this idea. The idea, although he calls all of the kind of inspiration messaging, he calls it the source, which I found a little woo-woo for me. But the idea is that all ideas are out there waiting for their time and waiting for someone who's being sensitive and noticing to act on them. And have you ever read Elizabeth Gilbert? I think it was in Big Magic. Her book.
She talks about that.
She talks about the same thing, and she has a very good example, because there was a story that she had written, and there's another author. She never acted on it, and then she met another author, Anne Patchett, I believe it was Anne Patchett, and who actually wrote the story. And it was a little changed, but the story was essentially the same. I think it was Bel Canto, but I can't remember. But we've all had those experiences too. Like, you know how you can now use an app. I don't know if all hairdressers or hair salons use it, but you can try a hairstyle and a hair color on using an app.
Yes.
That was my idea when I was 15. Wouldn't it be great if there was a way that you could actually take a picture and see what a hairstyle would look like on you? And I'm like, that was my idea.
How old were you?
Maybe 15, maybe 18. I was young. It was before the internet, but it was that's
before there was such a thing as apps. But
no, but the idea was a photo that somebody could use to, create this sort of thing. So I had an idea. I never acted on it. How many ideas have we had that we haven't acted on? which is an interesting idea. And then he kind of ties that in with the whole idea of movements. So, you know, he talks about movements in music or movements in art. So I always come back to things like the abstract expressionists, because they're a well-defined movement, but only after the fact. And the people that were making that work at the time did go, ooh, I'm an abstract expressionist and I'm going to make work like this because. And so in his lingo, source was out there, and there were a lot of people who were tapping into that because of the time where they lived, politically, geography, that sort of thing, and that came about. And he also says, you know, the cost of not noticing and not paying attention and not acting on that idea is it's going to go away, and somebody else is going to grab onto it at some time. So,
yeah, that's an interesting one to ponder. But have you ever had it like, I mean, I can't think of a specific example that relates to me in terms of art. I didn't know about the hair. I mean, I knew about the hair app. I didn't know it was your idea originally. But the whole thing about, I guess because I don't paint that way. I don't paint and go, I have this idea that I'm going to put down on a canvas, and then if I don't do it, somebody else does it. I mean, how does that relate, do you think, with artists?
But does that have to be a concrete idea? I mean, you know, you think about a musician who's just, you know, riffing on his guitar in the studio or whatever, and all of a sudden a little melody comes to him, and they start to play it. That would be the idea, that melody came out of source, or that sound, or, you know, you decide one day to pick up something interesting. There's an interesting tool that you haven't used before, or you haven't used in a while, and you pick up and you start using that. Well, that would also be, I think, according to him, sort of, you know, source, listening to whatever's out there that's inspiring you or sparking you to make that choice at the time.
And also just that intuition. Like, don't you find some days you'll just grab something, and it's almost like your brain hasn't had a chance to say, go grab that. That your body is actually grabbing it and doing something before you even have a chance to go, was that a good idea? Should I have grabbed that color? You know, like, you're not analyzing every single thing you do. You're really going on intuition and instincts. It's almost mindless in a way.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. Does anybody else want to jump in and talk about a chapter that they particularly liked, or something that resonated with them?
Otherwise, I'm just going to keep throwing stuff out here because there's a lot to talk about. I love this. Did somebody want to come on?
No.
All right. So creation is not about commerce. So we're living in a time where everything is so tightly connected to, well, can you make something out of this? Like, can you make some money off of this? And marketing and all of that. And it almost seems like he's saying, just get rid of that mindset, because, you know, it's not about commerce. We aren't creating to produce or sell material products. The act of creation is an attempt to enter a mysterious realm. It's a longing to transcend. So it's almost like you can't stop yourself. You need to make stuff. You need to make things, whether it's a painting or a sculpture, or, you know, you're working in your workshop and building a great table or something like that. You're not doing it, hopefully not thinking, okay, I'm going to monetize this somehow. And I liked that.
I like it, but I also feel like it's highly unrealistic. And even in the situations he's worked in, I mean, it might be ideal to be able to put yourself in that mindset, but he goes into the recording studio with the Dixie Chicks. The point is not just to have fun and make music. The point, because they're paying money for musicians and space, and the point is to walk away with an album at the end of a period of time. So at the same time, you know, I understand that it's just like when we say, you know, not letting our brains move ahead to the finished product when we're making a painting, regardless of whether we're trying to sell it or not, but being in the moment and letting creativity happen and not being so consumed with, is it done? Is it done? But in his real life situations, both of those things would have to be held at the same time. Somebody, maybe the musicians don't, you know, maybe the actual creatives, the musicians, are encouraged to not be thinking about that. And maybe the producers and the managers are allowed to be thinking about that. But I don't see how, I think it's a very idealized idea that you can separate those two things. I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, you know, you always want to, but at some point they seem to come back together, unless you are a creative who has no interest in putting their work out into the world.
Or, I mean, because we share our work, right? We do share our work. We have social media to put our work out there. We show it to people. Sometimes we show it in like real life to people. I like not having that pressure of thinking that you're creating for something specific. Although, you know, successful artists, if they have shows, you know, lined up for a year, they have to create a collection for their galleries, you know, and it'd be good to have, who's out there who actually does that? It'd be good to have some input from somebody who does that. Does that change your experience of making your art when you've got, oh, I've got 4 exhibitions coming and I've got 8 weeks to create a body of work for each one? How does that impact the way that you paint?
Well, I mean, I think it can work both ways. You know, it can force. I mean, he believes that you shouldn't be working on a timeline. I believe that's something I was just listening to yesterday. Said, you know, putting an end, like I need to have this perfect idea done by this date is often, you know, really not a good thing for us to do. But sometimes those kinds of deadlines actually get you to finish and get you through some of the other sticking points in the middle of the creative process. And so, and one of the things he talks about later, you know, is I forget what he says, what he calls it. It's the point where you keep looking at the idea over and over and over and over and over again. You're partway through, you're kind of stuck, maybe you're procrastinating, you're constantly going back into things, and that's preventing you from finishing the work. But having a deadline forces you to move through that process more quickly. And I will say for me, like I had 3 months to get 6 large paintings completed with a gap in between for a holiday. And I was incredibly productive over that time. I did not, you know, fart around the way I sometimes do when I go into the studio and spend 6 hours and make 3 marks and rearrange things and look at things and convince myself I've had a full day. So,
well, he brings it down, right? He talks about, I've got the his phases of creation. So the seeds, that's the beginning,
right,
where something starts sprouting, right? That experimentation, which I love. So you can hang out in the experimentation phase for a long time if you want. Then crafting, where you start to go in and once you have a clear sense of direction on where a piece is going, then you go back in, and that's when you look at value design and all of that stuff. And then completion, finishing. So he talks about how some artists are great at the experimenting phase, but completing work is really tough. And then there are those who rush to completion, and they skip through those early phases that really help to guide your work, right? So there's like almost like the two kinds of artists.
And then there was what I was referring to was the crafting, getting stuck in the crafting stage where you just spend so much time going back and forth. And, you know, he actually suggests at one point that you can spend too much time with a work in progress that part of it, we talk about this all the time, you know, falling in love with little bits and not being able to move on. We can't see the greater good that will happen if we get rid of something that we really, really love. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. And I don't know, where do you see yourself? Do you have harder time with the beginning or with this, which area?
It's funny because I can flip the switch and become a really focused editor of a piece. I love the experimentation phase and the crafting. So it just depends. And then if a piece isn't really evolving, this is where my editor wants to jump in too early, like that completion part. And it's just, let's just finish it. And then I get frustrated. I can actually feel it, right? And the advice I would take from him is you need to step away from it, which is sometimes hard to do. I don't know if you have trouble stepping away from a piece, but I will look at it like from across the room and I'm like, I'm coming back in, I'm going back in, and I'm going to finish this stupid thing. But that's probably the part of the book I'll be rereading more, is just to be able to have that distance. It's almost like a healthy, like you're attached, but you're not, you're this like, I can't remember what he called it. You're detached, like to practice this sense of detachment where you can go back in and do something radical to it or you know,
That's true.
start another piece and forget about that one for a while.
Yeah.
You know, how about you?
I find, so for me, one of the suggestion of walking away, I have to be really careful with how long I walk away from something. Because one of the things I've learned about myself in the last 6 months is that I really do need to have a relationship with the painting that I'm working on. And I've only been working on a couple at a time. And when I walk away for too long, I'm apt to think I go one way or the other. I'm either like, that's done, because I'm completely unwilling to go back in, and I can't even talk to it anymore. It's like the conversation's closed. So there's two options. The one option is to say it's finished, and I'm not even very good at that point of going through my list of questions if something's finished. It's just, I'm done with it, so it's finished. Or I'm going to completely start all over again. I'm not good at going back in and being somewhere in the middle with my work. And I find that really interesting. I'm going to psychoanalyze myself, because I think it means something about me. I think
it makes your heart wander.
No, I think
it doesn't wander.
I think there's other areas in my life where I do the same thing, where if something's not complete and I take a break from it, I just don't go back. And I'm looking at like places in my house where I thought I was going to do something, 20 years ago, and I never did.
Well,
it's like that ugly wallpaper, right? You move into a new place and it's got some horrible wallpaper, and you swear you're going to do something about it, and 2 years later you haven't done anything with it, which means 20 years later it's still going to be there.
It's going to be there. You'll be selling the house and it's still going to be there. But it's true. It's like how we make our art is like our artists is also how we live our life.
What's that quote? How we do one thing is how we do all things.
Everything.
Which I don't completely agree with, but the general idea is kind of, our approach in one sphere is probably not all that different from our approach in other spheres of our life.
I like finishing things. I can't imagine. It's like I make my bed every, and I know that sounds like a stupid, like who cares, but there's something about making a bed, having those little routines. I don't have a ton of unfinished work around. I really don't, because I wouldn't be comfortable. I don't think I could handle that if I had like 20 paintings that were like 75% of the way done, because that would mean nothing's going to get finished.
Yes.
Couldn't do that. I can't move on without bringing those to completion.
I totally agree. Oh, Douglas has a great comment. He says, dropping a signature is always the last step for him. Do you feel the same? Yeah.
Douglas, sometimes I forget I actually have to sign something. Like when or name them. It's almost this weird thing. Like when I had to take my 2 pieces in for the Alds Guild show, I hadn't signed them. I hadn't named them. And it was almost like I easily could have just dropped them off with nothing. It's weird. I don't know if that's like a Freudian thing, like you're not really done with it, or I'm so detached from it that it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah,
it is.
I find that very much so. And in the past, I've always really waited, really delayed on signing pieces. And I finished 2 pieces last week, and part of it was because one of the chapters was about the work will take as long as the work takes. And sometimes you can make I'm not going to say a great piece of work, but I'm going to say something that I'm happy with and that I feel is finished. Sometimes it doesn't have to take 3 months. Sometimes it can be done in a week, because that's all you had to say. And I had a couple pieces that came together very quickly. I think I shared them. They were quite bright and stuff, as my stuff is usually. And I decided, I kind of went, yeah, but I've only worked on these for a week. And then I was reading that and I'm like, you know what? That's okay, because these paintings are finished. And I signed them and I moved them to the other room.
Get them out of there. I've got 2 pieces where they came together like in a weekend. And I'm thinking, that's not right. That couldn't be. But the whole time I was painting them, I'm like, this is really like, everything's just coming together really quickly, and happy with this. And it's got a bit of this and it got a bit of that. And I will not allow myself to go back in there and fart around with them, because they decided to finish fast. Others take a lot longer.
Well, and the analogy is he does talk about some recording artists that he's worked with where, the essence of a really great song came together in 5 minutes. And sometimes that's what happens.
Even after all the notes and stuff that were taken, like, well, maybe go back and do this.
Yeah.
No, it still was better.
Yeah. The kernel of that 5 minutes of, improvisation, or just, ooh, I have an idea. That's what the piece is about. And I don't know that people other than artists, and I'm not saying all artists do this, but we have had these conversations before about being uncomfortable with work that comes together too quickly, whatever that means, that we all have this kind of idea that we need more time and development and layers, and that those things equate to better
stronger
piece
work
or stronger work or whatever. And it clearly is not the same assumption in the music industry. If you're going in to record, and you're paying a lot of money for studio time, there is some element of, yes, let's have some exploration, let's give creativity time to bloom, but we cannot be in, it's not bad if it comes together quickly.
And it makes no difference at the end. That I thought was interesting too, whether you struggle over something or whether it happens quickly, it makes no difference, because ultimately, whoever's looking at it has no clue what you went through to do it.
Isn't that funny too? Because I know a lot of artists will say, like, I want people to see the struggle, the decisions and the struggle that I made when I was working on something. And I'm not sure that I see that in anybody else's work. If I were to look at a piece if I, like you've shown me work that's you've struggled with, and I can go, oh yeah, I can see, because I see renditions of it. But then if I didn't have the backstory and I looked at the finished work, would I have noticed that an artist had struggled? Would I be able to tell that, oh, she just whipped that one off in 3 days versus, wow, she's been working on that one for 6 months? I can really tell the difference.
Yeah. I'm always surprised at that too. Like, someone will post a piece and it'll just look lovely and free and loose, and they'll be like, well, this one just drove me around the bend and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I can't tell. Like, you cannot tell. Kind of switching gears a little bit. I love some of his suggestions about what you can do to change things up.
I was going to go there.
Yeah, I love it.
Upside down? Paint upside down.
Well, there's like crazy stuff like that, but just like little things. I love the idea of like change your environment. Okay, like I'm always painting in the same place. What if I move to a different place in the condo I have never painted before, and that would change. I've done that before. Like, have you ever sat on the floor somewhere in your house where you've never sat before?
Yeah, I have.
And you know that you're sitting there going, I'm like under the dining room table. I have never sat under the dining room table, and this is like a whole new world.
And then you look up and you go, oh, I haven't dusted up there in a long time.
But I love that. Like, just change your environment. Like just something little, even facing the other way. I thought, well, that's quite interesting. I always am facing the window. What if I decided to actually paint on the side table where I'm facing a wall? Like, maybe that would help a little bit. Change the stakes. This was like kind of an interesting one that you could apply to life. That whole thing about live every day as if it were your last, right? So this was, imagine this is the last time you'll ever paint again. Yeah. Would that be helpful, or would that be?
No, for me, that would be like, I'd be putting so much pressure on myself to make something good.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that one would work for me, because it places a lot of importance of this. What else? Alter the perspective. Now, for this, I guess it was for his writers and stuff, or actually it could even be for us. They said, like, crank up the music you're listening to. That might just annoy everybody around me. But how would we alter the perspective?
I was thinking more about where's the work going to be seen, or who's going to see the work, right? So, if you're painting and you normally paint and your work goes on Instagram only, what if you were painting for a big white wall in a gallery? How would that change what you were doing, or vice versa, right? I mean, those sorts of things. Or you were painting because you were teaching a bunch of kids at a camp. I was thinking about more the perspective being more the audience, where the work was going to be seen, who was going to see the work, what was the context of it. Okay,
so that's pretty cool. Play with imagery. play with imagery. So that one I was thinking, I'm not really sure how that would relate if you're a non-representational artist. I see if you were an artist who paints what they see, and you always paint people, so try something completely different.
I was thinking when I read that one, I was thinking more about the way we sometimes doctor our images. So, you know, like a black and white or no tans sort of approach.
Oh.
So that would be imagery, or what was the other one?
That took it literally, like change what you're actually doing.
Yeah, or I was thinking there was an app that I used to really like to use called Waterlog, or Logue, and you put a photo in it and then it creates a watercolor painting from it, and you can change all different aspects of it to make it like more avant-garde or more linear. And so those sorts of things, if you're using references, even if you're an abstract painter, sometimes I'm thinking, you know, I'm painting from a photo in my head, not at all like, what does it look like? What does it look like if I turn it on its side? What does it look like if I crop it?
Yes.
What is that if I run it through one of these kinds of apps to just make it look very, very different than what it actually is? So that was how I was thinking.
Okay, cool. Here's something else. I like this. Limit the rules. And so this is a tough one because we've all taken workshops before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've taken workshops from fabulous artists who have a very particular way of working, and they have a very particular way of approaching their process. It's their process. It's what works for them, right? And then we try it to see if it works for us, right? Keep what works, keep what doesn't. When you bring too many rules to your work, you limit your imagination and often create more of what's done before, instead of creating something that is true to your inner landscape and unique to your experience in the in the world. So rules can be helpful guideposts, but most forms of art have many conventions that can go unrecognized and prevent you from seeing your path clearly. So do we get mired down in some rules? Oh, like we have to have different size shapes with the composition, or don't use too many colors. Figure out which is the hero color. I know these are things that I think about as I'm painting, and maybe sometimes that's too restrictive.
It's interesting. Two sides to that coin, right? Because too many rules is not a good thing. And that actually, I want to talk a bit about the beginner's mindset chapter too, because I really like that one. Too many rules can constrain us and basically create barriers to roads that we won't go down because we're not supposed to, for whatever reason, you know. But then when we have no limitations, it can be very, very hard to decide what to actually do. We can have this problem of, you know, I have 1,000 colors, which one should I start with? Or, you know, so having some guidelines and limitations can help us. And I think of rules and limitations as kind of the opposite, or they're similar but not the same, if you know what I mean.
Maybe the rules, some of the rules, the ones that help us come into play in the completion phase or the crafting phase. In the experimenting phase, maybe just no rules. Like if you want to paint with your elbow, paint with your elbow. If you want to, you know, squirt 20 colors onto your canvas at the same time and smear them around, you know, with the cat, like do it. And then later, some of those rules, when the crafts, like when you get into that crafting, the jeweler phase, when you're not being a bricklayer, when you have to go in and turn it into something aesthetically pleasing, is that what our goal is?
You can use those to help you guide those later decisions about, you know, editing and pruning and things.
But I think he stands pretty firm, though, on not being overly influenced. Like, yes, listen, look at what other, you know, artists that you admire, look at what they're doing, but bear in mind that that is what works for them. It may not necessarily work for you, and don't feel that you failed because you're not able to do exactly that.
Well, I think he's also an advocate for not looking or listening to too many other artists when you're creating for yourself, because that also sets up the, you know, the comparison, and it helps to reinforce those rules, because if you see everybody else doing things a certain way, it can be even harder to kind of push against them.
So this is something that I've noticed on Facebook in a group, I won't say which, but of a great workshop, an online workshop that I did. and just a fabulous course in and of itself. And then I looked at the maybe this is why I stay out of the Facebook groups for these courses, because every time I go in, it's like I can't tell who did the work, if it was the lead, the instructor artist, or if it was, and I start seeing these it's like bizarro interpretations. Some of them almost like, my God, that could be that person's work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I immediately get out of the group because there's something about that just makes me really uncomfortable. It's almost like everybody's sublimating what they want to make and just making these, I don't want to say knockoff, that sounds so negative, but making these derivative copies of what somebody else has really invest, like that's their domain, like that. And now you've got like 250 people all replicating it. That, I don't know, there's something about that.
Well,
Patricia say
she doesn't participate in workshop Facebook groups. Yeah, me neither. And I also don't feel I get so tired of having to validate everybody else's poor self-esteem.
How can I make this better?
I don't belong here. I'm not as good as everybody else.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Everybody, if you have those feelings, you got to work through it. We can't help you with that. We all have them at times, right? It's not an uncommon thing to feel like everybody else is better than you. But what was I going to say? But I do think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought the book, he talked a little bit about when we learn things, it's very common to copy. That's sort of how we start. But how quickly we move away from that and, add it or subtract it to what we're already doing is that's the creative part.
I loved what Marlene was doing, was her project of the blind contour.
Yes.
So there's somebody who wanted to, I just thought this was a brilliant way to put yourself in another artist's shoes. And she did it with multiple artists with that project she did, where she did the blind contour line drawings, but then she took them to their own place. So I think there is a way of seeing what somebody else is doing and kind of, whether or not that resonates with you or it's something you can add or take away something from it. I think that's maybe a more authentic way of I guess. Yeah.
What even Rick Rubin's comment is that, the completion of any creative piece that we make is then that goes out into the universe and becomes source for everyone else. Douglas, it's Rick Rubin, Rubin. The book's called The Creative Act. And if you go to I know on my main Instagram feed, it's pinned at the very top. You'll be able to see the post about this one, and we'll share it in the.
Douglas, you got it. If you haven't read it, it's just read it in 10-minute chunks.
Yeah.
You don't have to read it.
So much there. There's so much of value, and some chapters will resonate more strongly with you than others. And I always think of it as like, oh, if I read something and then I want to know why it resonated, why I thought it was more interesting to me than others. But the one chapter that I really did enjoy was the one on beginner's mind. And so it follows from these ideas of rules. And I've struggled with this because I didn't go to art school. I don't have an art pedigree. I haven't been painting for a long period of time. And I have had comments that have floated past me, whether they're directed to me or not, or whether I'm just internalizing them, about, what is it with all these women in their 50s who retire and now want to call themselves an artist?
Really?
I heard that one, and I'm like, that's actually me. You're talking to me. That's me. But then on the other side of the coin, I've now interacted with enough other artists who also don't have that pedigree and who have used words like they describe themselves as being unencumbered by a formal art education. And so if you can kind of see it the other way, that if you don't know the rules, it's easier to break them.
Can I tell you, yes, I had a formal art education. Does it ever even enter my little brain when I'm painting? Right. Never, because it's so many decades ago. And, who you are in your 20s is not who you are in your 50s or 60s.
Of
And all of that is like, it's almost, I don't want to say obsolete, but it's not important. It's really not important. And it's more about the person who says that to you than it is about you. I would love it actually if someone said that to me. I'd just deck them because I haven't had someone ask like, oh, so what's your art education background? Nobody. I'd love them to though. I'd like them to. Just because it's not relevant. It's really not relevant. So there.
But beginner's mindset, because everything is possible. Yeah. And the other thing, and he doesn't say this specifically, but my background as a fitness coach is, I always say that beginners are the luckiest people that you train, because they see their rate of growth as they're getting started and learning new things, they progress really fast. And once you've been doing something for a longer period of time, your growth becomes more incremental. You don't see that rate of change the same anymore. And so I think that's somewhat true with art as well, with anything that we're making. Is like, although there are, it's punctuated by periods of what I would think of as sea change. You take a course or a workshop with somebody and you come out of it and it just like blows your mind. And there's a big leap in your technical skills and your understanding of something as a consequence. But a lot of times when you just start out, if you look at somebody who's just beginning to paint and they're diligent and they're paying attention to their materials and they're practicing regularly, you'll see really, really quick change in their work, their ability to control their brush, their understanding of their paint.
Just that hand-eye coordination. I love this little bit on innovative work. Interesting comment. He says, anything that's innovative is likely to polarize people. You will attract as many people as you alienate. So you see those artists out there who all of a sudden they change the way they're doing something, and then they're going to get people like, I liked it when you did those landscapes. Why are you getting into that abstract stuff? Or even, changing a palette or changing a color palette. Like they've always done a particular palette and then they change it. They're going to get pushback from people. But I love that he frames it. It's innovative work. So you're not just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. So it becomes rote, which personally for myself, I can't keep replicating the same stuff over and over again. Then he adds, a helpful barometer for any work is to make sure that you love it, which seems like an obvious thing.
Yeah.
But I can imagine if you go into that, if you're a super successful artist and you've been doing a certain thing, paintings a certain way, and they sell like hotcakes, and there are artists, like their work just flies out the door. In a way, it's like golden handcuffs, because you've got people who want your work, and they don't even need to see it. They just know, you do this, I'm going to buy it. But then you're kind of like, unless you're really fearless, it would be tough to change your course.
Well, and I've seen that conversation around people who have gallery success. Is that when you sign with a gallery, they are, especially a more prestigious gallery, they are basically saying, we like the work you're doing now, we can market the work you're doing now, and we want to be able to keep selling this type of work in the future, which I think is,
a blessing and a curse. A blessing and a curse.
And I'm sure there's those places out there where they invest in the artist and they're happy to see your evolution. And certainly, and I know when we've talked with Rob Sott before, he's talked a little bit about how collectors who get invested in your work are happy to be able to own a little piece of that point in time.
Yes.
But that's only something you can say in retrospect. I think it's hard to say that right now, right? If you're early in your art career, but
emerging. There's an artist whose work I really love, who has beautiful landscapes that he does, very loose and free. He also does abstract work, which you can kind of see some of that. And then he does very white work where there's almost no color palette, and he's a potter. And I'm thinking, that is fantastic, because he's doing all these different things, but there's a thread of commonality with all of that. And I just think that is ideal. Like, and I think I don't know if all his work is accepted by collectors, and I even saw him him experimenting with more hard edge, kind of a little bit like Kyle's a little bit, but very different. But he's a well-established artist, and I thought, good for you, buddy.
Excellent.
It's nice to see.
Well, if you're going to have a long art career, you think of people who started in their 20s and are still painting in their 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
They can't have been doing the same thing all the time. They would get so bored of their own work, I would think. Right?
I'd be so bored of all of that. Yeah. I hate to tell you, we've been nattering away for 55 minutes.
Sorry, guys. I guess we had a lot to talk about. It's actually a kind of book that it's, you know, you could almost take a chapter and spend an hour talking about a chapter and getting more people. Nobody requested to join us because I guess maybe they thought we were doing okay on our own.
Well, like honestly, we could have just kept pulling stuff out and just talking about it. Thank you, Patricia,
Thanks for being here. So if you missed most of that conversation, we were talking about Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act. Highly recommend you read or listen to it in small doses and think of it as, you know, maybe it's a good getting started in studio practice. That's what I was thinking. That could be like my, 10-minute calming listening thing as I'm cleaning stuff up before I get started painting for the day. Highly worthwhile. And lots
Lindsay, you'll like it. Definitely.
You will.
You'll really enjoy it. It's relatable, applicable to all kinds of, not just painters, right? Beyond.
Yes.
Anyways, we have 2 guests next week, right?
We do. We're going to be talking about collaborative projects. We have Sam Waters and Sue Bulmer from the UK are going to talk about an interesting collaborative project that they've been working on for a while now. And I've been following it. I think you have too, Barb, on Instagram. And we want to hear about how maybe we'll get inspired to do something like that.
He talks about collaboration too. We didn't even get into that in his version of collaboration. Anyways, have a creative week. Rest of the week. And may no bones be broken.
May no bones be broken. No more bones be broken.
More bones.
All right. Thanks, guys, for joining us. We will see you next Tuesday.
Adios.
Yeah. Read it. Read it. You'll love it.
Read it. 2 thumbs up. 2 paintbrushes up.
Bye.